On this show, we compare the best parts of our childhoods and argue which decade was better, the 80s or the 90s.
In this episode, we'll be discussing which decade had the best family sitcom, the history of 1981 versus 1991, and if 1990's Crystal Pepsi would fly today.
Which decade was better? You can help us decide.
So stick around for this episode of 10 Years Apart.
We're going back, way back. It's the 10 Years Apart podcast.
80s versus 90s.
With Adam and Scott.
Welcome to the 10 Years Apart podcast. I'm Scott, one of the hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Adam. Adam, how's things going?
Things are great.
So this podcast is all about comparing our childhoods. My childhood was growing up during the 1980s, and Adam's was in the 1990s. This makes us 10 years apart.
In this episode, we are going to be comparing which decade we thought had the best family sitcom.
I'll pick my favorite family sitcom from the 1980s, and Adam will pick his from the 1990s.
Then we'll debate on which sitcom was the best, and remember, you can also vote which sitcom was your favorite from those decades.
You can vote right here if you're watching us on YouTube by clicking on the poll in the top right corner, or you can vote on any of our social media at 10 Years Apart Pod, or by visiting our website at 10yearsapart.com.
After we get through our debate on family sitcoms, we'll also have our segment, which we call Does It Fly Today?, where we look at a movie, a song, or a product from either the 1980s or 1990s and discuss if we think it holds up, or if it would even fly today.
On this episode, we'll be looking back at a 1990s drink fad, Crystal Pepsi, and asking, would that fly today?
That will be a little later, so stick around for that too. And before we get into our best family sitcom debate, we're going to start off with the first segment, which we call A Year from the Past.
A year from our past.
In A Year from Our Past, we'll be doing a brief history look back at a year from each decade and what we remember from those years.
So Scott will be looking back at 1981, and I'll be covering 1991.
So I'll get us started with 1981. So we'll first look at some popular movie releases. So some popular movies from 1981, we had Raiders of the Lost Ark, Mad Max 2, Excalibur, The Fox and the Hound, American Werewolf in London, Escape from New York, Clash of the Titans, Superman 2, and Evil Dead. The best picture from 1981 was Chariots of Fire, and the highest grossing movie from that year was Raiders of the Lost Ark, which made around $367 million.
And for popular movies from 1991, we have the following: Terminator 2, Robin Hood, The Silence of the Lambs, The Addams Family, Beauty and the Beast, Boys in the Hood, My Own Private Idaho, JFK, and Point Break. The winner for Best Picture in 1991 was The Silence of the Lambs, starring Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster, and the highest grossing film of that year was Terminator 2, with just under $205 million.
So I think definitely 1991 Best Picture was better than 1981. I don't even know if I saw Chariots of Fire.
Rings a bell. I don't know if I saw it either.
Obviously, Silence of the Lambs was a great movie. Maybe you didn't see that as a kid, but I definitely watched that in 1991. Grossing movies, Raiders and Terminator 2, that's a tough one. I'm a huge Raiders of the Lost Ark fan. Terminator 2 was good. See, I'm a bigger fan of the original Terminator than I am Terminator 2.
Really?
Yeah.
I think for me, Terminator 2 is actually better than the first one in terms of special effects and just...
Yeah, but 1980s all the way.
That's true. Okay.
Some other movies, Addams Family, I liked the TV show as a kid, but that was like a 60s TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Beauty and the Beast, that was a movie? Oh, the Walt Disney animation?
Disney movie, yeah.
That's one of my favorite animation movies, actually. Mm-hmm. Boys in the Hood was good. There was other movies like that I like better, like Menace to Society.
Menace to Society is a classic, yeah.
My Own Private Idaho, I don't remember.
That's Keanu Reeves, I think, in River Phoenix.
Point Break was great. I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a great one. For the 1981, again, this is before my time, but I did see a lot of these movies. I was a huge fan of Indiana Jones. I actually like the third one more than the first and second, though. Superman 2, I was a huge fan of Superman when I was a kid. Evil Dead, I've never seen.
Great horror movie.
I've heard
all of those.
I've heard American Werewolf in London is pretty phenomenal in terms of its practical effects.
Yeah, that movie scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I think I saw that not in 1981, but I saw it at a pretty young age, and it terrified me. I didn't see Evil Dead till I was obviously a lot older, but Escape from New York is a pretty big cult classic. I'm not a huge fan of that movie. Fox and the Hound, I think it was my first Disney movie that I saw in the theater. Is it better than Beauty and the Beast? Maybe not, but Fox and the Hound, I was told I cried a lot at it. So
yeah, I remember seeing that at my grandparents' place when I was a kid.
Mad Max 2 was one of the best out of that series, I think. Maybe not the new one. What was the new one called?
Fury Road.
Excalibur was popular. I wasn't a fan of it, but popular movie. I don't know. It's hard to say which decade had better movies that year.
I'd have to go with 1991. I think Terminator 2 is a classic. Silence of the Lambs is amazing. I think there's some other stuff in here that is not so good. I think JFK was pretty terrible. Yeah, the Addams Family is kind of
complicated, not terrible.
Yeah.
But Terminator 2 is a classic, but it would never have been made without Terminator. So,
right,
which was the 80s. I think those movies, it's hard to say, but there's quite a few classics from 1981. So I guess it's up to listeners out there. What decade do you think had better movies, 81 or 91? All right, moving on to music. Some hit music that came out in 1981. We had Kenny Rogers with Lady, Rick Springfield with Jesse's Girl, Dolly Parton, 9 to 5, Blondie, The Tide is High, Joey Scarberry, Believe It or Not, Def Leppard, Bringing on the Heartache, Ozzy Osbourne, Flying High Again. And the song of the year was Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Carnes.
Some hit songs from 1991 include Everything I Do It For You by Bryan Adams, Good Vibrations by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Baby Baby by Amy Grant, Joyride by Roxette, Losing My Religion by R.E.M., I Wanna Sex You Up by Color Me Bad, It Ain't Over Till It's Over by Lenny Kravitz, and Song of the Year was Everything I Do It For You by Bryan Adams, and it was featured in the hit movie Robin Hood.
Yeah, that was a pretty popular song.
Right.
I'll give it credit because Bryan Adams is Canadian, but good song. Wasn't too many big hits from 1981, so this is going to be a tough one. Jesse's Girl is a good song.
Yeah.
Blondie, The Tide is High. Believe It or Not, do you know that song?
I'm walking on air. Yeah, from it's like a superhero.
Show. American, what was it called? I used to watch it. America's Greatest Hero.
Right.
Def Leppard, I'm a huge Def Leppard fan. You know, before Pour Some Sugar on Me. Before, that probably was in the 90s, but earlier Def Leppard was good. Ozzy was always good. Song of the Year, what was 1991? Oh,
Betty Davis.
Bryan Adams. Betty Davis Eyes is a classic song. I have to say I like it more than the Bryan Adams song, but neither one of them are my music style. So
I have to say a lot of these songs from 1981 and 1991 I know from movies.
Yeah, that's true.
Obviously the Dolly Parton 95 and Jesse's Girl I think was later on. I saw it in I think Boogie Nights or something like that. And then for the 1991, obviously the Robin Hood song.
1991 had some songs that kind of drove me nuts, like Good Vibrations. I mean, it was catchy, but it got on my nerves. Baby Baby, I don't know. Roxette had a few songs that I kind of liked. I don't think Joyride was one of them, though.
I was a huge fan of the Losing My Religion song by R.E.M.
I can't stand R.E.M., so...
All right.
I think they had one song that I didn't mind, but not a big fan of theirs.
I think this is one of their biggest hits.
I Wanna Sex You Up drove me nuts.
The Lenny Kravitz song is good.
Yeah, Lenny Kravitz is the guy I don't mind. He's a good musician and had quite a few good songs.
Yeah.
But overall, music from both decades were kind of shitty.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'd give it to 1991. Let us know in the comments below what year you thought had better music, 1981 or 1991. So moving on to 1981 and TV news and other events. In TV, MTV was launched, which wasn't big for us being in Canada because we had Much Music, and I think that came out a little bit later. but MTV was a big thing. Some popular toy releases. There was a Jaws game. It was, people might remember that. It was kind of like a Mr. Big Mouth, where you had to take things out of its mouth without it snapping. Clash of the Titans figures came out from the movie. And My Pretty Pony came out that year, which I think developed into My Little Pony later on. I'm not sure on that, but they look the same. Some technical breakthroughs were scientists identified the AIDS virus. The first flight of U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia was launched. IBM in the U.S. launches its first PC, which is used by Microsoft software MS-DOS. And the term Internet is first mentioned. Some news and events from 1981. Pope John Paul II was shot but not killed. Lady Diana and Prince Charles got married. The first ever London Marathon was held. Sandra Day O'Connor is nominated to become the first female justice on the U.S. Supreme Court.
And I'm going to go through some popular 1991 TV news and other events. For TV, all major television network schedules are preempted by Gulf War coverage right after the evening news broadcasts. Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit video debuts on MTV's 120 Minutes. The music video for Black or White, the first single from Michael Jackson's forthcoming 8th album Dangerous, is first televised by Fox. And despite controversy over the video's ending, Fox, which simulcasts the video along with MTV, VH1, and BET, scores its highest Nielsen ratings to date. For popular toy releases of 1991, we have the Super Nintendo. Technical breakthroughs include the first website was built and put online, first color image scanner was released, Norton antivirus software was introduced, and Apple releases the PowerBook, the first modern laptop. For news events of 1991, we have Operation Desert Storm, driving Iraqi troops out of Kuwait. Boris Yeltsin wins the first democratic election in Russia to become president, and apartheid is dismantled in South Africa. The cannibal serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, is arrested in the U.S. Freddie Mercury, lead singer of the rock band Queen, announces he has contracted AIDS and dies shortly afterwards. And police brutality is exposed on film in the beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles, USA.
All right, so for news and events, I kind of remember a lot of things from both decades, and it's kind of interesting how some of them are related. Like in TV, a lot of your things were music videos, and MTV was launched in 1981.
Right.
So those music videos wouldn't have existed maybe, or maybe they would have, but anyway, MTV had a big part of that. AIDS was first diagnosed, and Freddie Mercury came out with AIDS in 1991.
Right.
The only thing I remember from 1981 in terms of news, I remember Pope John Paul II getting shot, seeing that. And I remember the royal wedding on TV of Lady Diana and Prince Charles. It was quite the thing at the time.
For me, I mean, I don't remember any 1981 because I wasn't born yet. But for 1991, I do remember Nirvana because my older brothers loved that band. I remember seeing that video. I remember the Black or White because of the technology. It was kind of like they morphed into different people.
Again, both of those you wouldn't have seen without MTV.
Right.
The Gulf War, I remember everything about that pretty much.
Yeah, I remember the Gulf War. I remember actually, I mentioned how Super Nintendo was released. I remember my brothers and I playing a Gulf War video game that was like a tank game where you're shooting other tanks in the desert.
Super Nintendo, I can't distinguish between Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and I think I had which one came with the orange gun?
That's the original. That's the original Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, that's better than Super Nintendo.
I think Super Nintendo's more better known for things like Mario Kart, like the first Mario Kart came out on that. I'm quite sure.
And another thing that kind of coincides, internet was first used in 1981, or the term for it, and the first website was built in 1991.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how there's a 10-year gap there. Again, technology, your decade should always win, but I don't know, this one's a bit closer.
I think my 1991 year, it's very, it has a lot to do with computers. I think the first modern laptop is a pretty big step because nearly everyone has one nowadays, right? So.
But the first desktop was in the 80s.
That's true.
I think with Apple, too. Apple's, whatever that was called, their first Apple computer was launched in the 80s. But not this year, so I'll give you that one.
Okay.
I definitely remember in 1991, I remember the Jeffrey Dahmer thing. And I definitely remember the riots in LA.
Yeah, it was
I
heavily
don't think you might not, but that was a thing that was constantly on TV, so I remember that a lot.
I think I learned more about Jeffrey Dahmer later on. I think, I was way too young for my parents to actually tell me about things like that. But I faintly recall seeing the Rodney King riots on TV.
Yeah.
And how a lot of business owners were, on top of their roofs of their businesses with guns, making sure that their storefronts weren't demolished.
Anyway, of course, you can let us know what you remember from either 1981 or 1991 in the comments below. Of course, there's a lot more music, movies, news events from both of those years, 1981 and 1991. So feel free to let us know about your favorites and your memories from those specific years in the comments below, wherever you find this podcast.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you regarding those years and get your feedback. Now let's move on to the main topic of this episode. It's time for Battle of the Decade.
3, 2, 1.
Battle of the Decade.
Fight.
I must break you.
So for the Battle of the Decade in this episode and our main topic, we'll be fighting it out on which decade had the best family sitcom. So this is going to be a sitcom, family sitcom. It's more something you could watch with the entire family. And some of the criteria for it has to have started either in the 1980s for me or in the 1990s for Adam. It could have gone on for decades after, but as long as it started in our respective decades.
Round 1. Let's fight.
Choose your fighter.
So I'll start with my choice. So the 1980s obviously had a lot of popular, family sitcoms. Some of them that came over from the 70s, but a lot of them started in the 80s. We had Who's the Boss, Full House, Married with Children, but that's not really a family sitcom. Growing Pains, Elf was super popular and the show I loved. Mr. Belvedere, Benson. The Simpsons actually started, but in the 80s, but not a family sitcom. Anyway, for my choice and my favorite family sitcom from the 80s, came out in 1982, and it was Family Ties. So the first episode aired in September of 1982, and it ran until 1989. I think there was a total of around 176 episodes during its run. Family Ties starred Michael J. Fox, Justine Bateman, Michael Gross, Tina Yothers, and Meredith Baker.
For 1990s sitcoms, we have a lot of them actually starting in the 1980s. So due to our criterion, I could not select the one I wanted to choose because it actually started in 1987. But some other notable ones that started in the 1990s include Sister Sister, Step by Step, Home Improvement, but the one I'm going to choose today is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, starring Will Smith and James Avery as Philip Banks, Alfonso Ribeiro as Carlton Banks, Karen Parsons as Hilary Banks, and we have two actresses who played the mother. We have Janet Hubert first, and then she was replaced by Daphne Reed, and I heard this was because Will Smith and Janet Hubert had kind of a tumultuous relationship on set, so Janet was eventually fired.
Round 2. Let's fight.
Tail of the tape.
So the reason I chose Family Ties is because that's where Michael J. Fox kind of broke out and became quite famous. And, that's what got him into his movie career. I think without Family Ties, he would never have been part of Back to the Future and, replaced the main actor originally in that movie. Michael J. Fox was great on the show. He was, the annoying son, super smart nerd type thing. But I just loved watching him, and I really liked Mallory, the older sister, on the show. I was just in love with her during the early 80s. And I think it was the first sitcom that I actually watched, regularly, and watching that with, my parents. Maybe my brother, I don't know. He was a little younger, but it's the first sitcom that I remember watching week to week type thing. And I just loved the show, so that's the reasons why I picked Family Ties.
The reason I chose Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is because it was on TV every day when I got home from school, and I enjoyed watching it. I thought Will Smith was very funny in it. I thought the stories are usually pretty good. They were, they had a comedic effect, but also they had usually the episodes had some kind of moral tale to them. I know the father, Phil Banks, was kind of like a wise old sage. And we had Will Smith's character getting in trouble all the time. He was kind of the outsider from West Philadelphia who kind of moves to Beverly Hills to live with his uncle and aunt. And I just thought it was a very fun show. I thought Carlton was pretty funny with his dance and everything. And, they showed the progression of, Will growing up and, from high school and then later getting into post-secondary school.
Round 3. Let's fight.
Counterattack.
All right, so what I remember, obviously I remember Fresh Prince. It's a show I occasionally watched. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I have nothing bad to say about it. It wasn't, in my wheelhouse at the time. I don't know. When did that come out? Do you know
1990.
1990. So I was like 17 or so around that time. And I remember the intro song becoming quite popular. And obviously that's what put Will Smith on the map, right?
Yeah.
Just like Family Ties did for Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, it ran for 6 years from 1990 until 1996. But I remember around the years 1994 and onwards, Will Smith we started seeing him in big budget movies like Independence Day and things like that.
Yeah. I was in high school when that show was on, I guess. So it was on, after, let's say, high school at the time too. So occasionally I watched it. Do remember it. To be honest, I don't remember much of the storyline of Family Ties. Again, it's just something I watched, and I have fond memories of watching that with my family. So that's kind of why. Is that a show that you
I remember
heard of?
watching it in the later years, and I remember, and I also remember, I faintly recall, like Leonardo DiCaprio showed up later in the series as like some kid they took in or something like that. Like he was like a foster kid or something like that.
No,
that was Growing
Pains.
Pains. Okay, sorry.
There were some maybe celebrities that made guest appearances here and there. Like I see Courtney Cox might have been on the show, but stuff I don't remember.
All right.
But I think there was a younger kid that was brought in later seasons, like whether he was adopted or they had a baby, I don't remember. But
oh, okay, yeah, I got those two confused. I'm sorry.
Round 4. Let's fight.
Final round.
so once again, the reasons I picked Family Ties is because it's the first family sitcom that I remember watching religiously week to week as a young child, watching it with my family and really liking Michael J. Fox. And it's a show that put him on the map and got him that film career that he's quite famous for with, classic movies like Back to the Future, Teen Wolf, and probably other future sitcoms that he was on. I know he did some. I don't know what they were.
There's one called Spin City, I think.
Spin City. I think he was on West Wing or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, Family Ties. I mean, the best family sitcom ever. Mine's got the word family in it.
Mm-hmm.
Family Ties. It's, it was, I remember it being great. I don't know how it would hold up today, but I just think it's a lot better family show than Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
All right. Well, the reasons why I chose Fresh Prince is I just thought it was, pretty entertaining. I liked Will Smith's character's antics in the show. I thought it was really well done. Like I said, I think the reasons why I chose it was because it was funny, but also there was also some kind of like moral tale within each episode that was kind of like progressive and like good for young watchers.
Both shows revolved around families, so
yeah,
we'll give it that.
Remember, you can vote on which family sitcom you thought was better in the poll in the above top right corner here on YouTube or on any of social media at 10 Years Apart Pod or at our website 10yearsapart.com.
And finally, on this episode of 10 Years Apart, we're going to look back at a 90s drink fad that was known as Crystal Pepsi. Could it make a comeback? Why did it fade away? It's time for Would That Fly Today?
Would that fly today?
Crystal Pepsi. So that was a thing in the early 90s, which was basically, I think, Pepsi that was just clear, like with some clear sodas, like 7-Up or something.
7-Up or Sprite.
Ginger ale. But I believe in Canada and the US that came out from around 1992 to 1994. So it only lasted 2 years. But anyway, Adam, do you remember Crystal Pepsi?
Well, I have a pretty strange memory about Crystal Pepsi. Later on in life is when I went to university and I was in Toronto, and I had a friend named Damien who's a little bit weird, and he's from out in Vancouver Island, and he used to show up at Much Music in downtown Toronto. And
yeah.
And when they
Queen
had
Street, maybe?
Yeah, where they had famous musical performers like Avril Lavigne or Justin Bieber show up or something. Justin Bieber was not around yet, but he would go there with big signs that said, "Bring back Crystal Pepsi." And it was just kind of like this weird thing because, nobody had talked about Crystal Pepsi in years, and he just thought it was kind of funny. So,
do you remember the taste of it or anything like that? I don't know. I can't remember the taste, and I don't know if it was any different than regular Pepsi.
I think I just recall it just being like sweet soda,
Was
nothing
it
special.
psychological? Like, did it taste different because it didn't look like Pepsi? I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I remember seeing something online like a couple years ago where a guy found a bottle of it in his basement, and it was like 15 years old, and he decided to drink it on camera, and he immediately vomits because it's expired.
Gone bad?
Yeah, it's gone bad, yeah. It's actually
I
kind of a funny
wasn't
video.
sure if cola went bad or not, as long as it was like unopened.
Yeah, I'm not sure this guy's reaction to it. His body just immediately rejects it. It's actually a pretty funny video.
Maybe he just didn't like Crystal Pepsi.
Could be.
But anyway, I don't remember the taste. It only lasted 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's got to be reasons why it didn't continue. I mean, the name of it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's got a good ring to it. And also, like, I've heard
It's
that
to the point.
I've heard that clear sodas like that are actually healthier than the ones, like the brown ones.
Yeah.
Because, there's not as much syrup in them and stuff like that.
So I don't know why it didn't last.
Mm.
But anyway, do you think Crystal Pepsi could make a comeback?
No, I don't think so.
No? I think they've tried
Really?
over the last, couple decades or whatever, but
Well, I don't know. With soda, like, sometimes things catch on, like Mountain Dew does, like, the Baja Blast, and it ends up, finding an audience. Unfortunately for Crystal Pepsi, though, I think people just thought it didn't taste the same, so it just didn't catch.
yeah, I don't think it would make a comeback either. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think maybe it could, but is it worth putting the effort into it or the money for Pepsi to do something like that? I could see another brand maybe trying it before Pepsi would try it again.
Yeah.
But I don't see him making a comeback either.
I could see maybe if they made it so that it sounded like a healthy alternative to regular Pepsi, like things like Coke Zero, they did pretty well because it was 0 calories, right?
That's if it's actually healthier.
Yeah.
Who knows? But anyway, for me, I don't think it would fly today.
Yeah, I don't think it would fly today if it was just regular Crystal Pepsi, but I think if they introduced it as a healthy alternative somehow, maybe people would catch on to it. Also, give us your feedback on Crystal Pepsi in the comments below, and you can vote on this in our second poll, again in the top right corner, or on our social media at 10 Years Apart Pod, or at our website, 10yearsapart.com. Crystal Pepsi, would they fly today?
No. Well, that's all for this episode of 10 Years Apart. Thanks for listening, and you can help us out by helping us decide which decade had the best family sitcom. Just head over to our website at 10yearsapart.com or any of our social media at 10 Years Apart Pod and vote right now. Leave us your comments and thoughts below wherever you find this podcast.
Join us again next week when we talk about which decade had the best fashion. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or anywhere you find podcasts, so you never miss out on an episode. If you came across this episode and enjoyed it, please tell your friends, family, and even strangers about it. Sharing really helps us out.
And once again, find us at 10yearsapart.com, on YouTube, and any social media at 10 Years Apart Pod. Stop by, vote, let us know what we missed, or if you have a different idea, and let us know some of your stories from the 80s and 90s.
Remember to like, subscribe, share, and leave us your comments wherever you found this podcast. And thanks again for tuning into the past with us here on 10 Years Apart.
What did you think about that episode of the 10 Years Apart podcast? If you liked it, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this. Vote on which decade you thought was better for this episode in the top right corner or at 10yearsapart.com. And leave us any comments you may have regarding the 1980s or the 1990s. Thanks again, and you can also check out some more videos like these.